bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers and the restless rhythm of ambition, there worked a man named Daniel Cruz, a single father and humble janitor who carried a silent storm in his heart. For though his uniform smelled of cleaning solutions and his hands were roughened by endless scrubbing of office floors, he bore within himself a mind sharpened by years of untold brilliance, and a legacy from his late father, a legacy he had never been allowed to fully explore because life had shackled him with responsibility too early when his wife passed away, leaving him to raise his little daughter, Emma, alone, forcing him to trade his dreams of research and invention for a mop and bucket. And every night, as he tucked Emma into bed in their small apartment, he whispered stories of perseverance, teaching her that no matter how the world might underestimate them, they carried within their veins the courage and brilliance of generations. Yet the cruel irony was that while Daniel swept the glass walls of laboratories and polished the handles of conference rooms, behind those very walls, the city's most powerful executives and scientists chased breakthroughs, formulas, and patents, never realizing that the man quietly wiping their tables was the son of a scientist who once came close to a world-changing discovery, but died before recognition ever reached him. And Daniel knew that deep inside the locked drawer at home was a weathered notebook with equations, sketches, and chemical formulas that his father had left behind, ideas far ahead of their time. And though Daniel once dreamed of bringing that vision to life, he buried those ambitions under duty and survival, until one stormy evening when fate shifted the ground beneath his weary feet. For as he polished the glass board of the CEO's office at the prestigious Zenith Corporation, his eyes widened and his heart nearly stopped, because on that transparent surface drawn with bold white marker was a formula, a precise arrangement of variables and chemical symbols that sparked a fire in his memory. Yes, it was unmistakably his father's work, the same equation he had stared at countless nights in the fragile notebook, the very sequence of brilliance his father had poured his soul into. And as Daniel's trembling hand traced the air above the glass, his voice cracked, whispering words he never thought he would speak aloud in that gilded office. "That's my father's formula." And in that instant, the CEO, Mr. Caldwell, a man of towering presence and polished arrogance, froze mid-sentence as he had been dictating orders to his assistants, his sharp eyes narrowing at Daniel with both shock and irritation, because janitors were supposed to be invisible, not interruptive. Yet here was this man, mop in hand, daring to speak with such conviction, daring to claim ownership of something Caldwell's company was about to present to the world as their next billion-dollar innovation. And the silence in that room grew heavy, so heavy that even the city lights beyond the glass seemed to pause their flickering, and Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears, for he had not intended to speak, but the weight of truth had erupted from him. And now he stood at the crossroads of courage and ruin, knowing that men like Caldwell crushed dissenters with a smile, but also knowing that this was the moment when his father's forgotten genius demanded a voice. So as Caldwell's assistants shifted uncomfortably and exchanged nervous glances. Daniel lifted his chin with unexpected strength, his mind racing back to every promise he had made to his daughter that one day he would show her that her family name stood for more than mops and forgotten corners, that they carried greatness even if the world refused to see it. And though fear gnawed at him, something brighter burned in his chest. Resolve. And that was the moment the story began. The story of a janitor who would no longer be invisible. A father who would fight not only for survival, but for recognition of a legacy stolen. A man who would soon stand against the mightiest of CEOs and shatter the illusion that power always belongs to those in suits. Because sometimes real power belongs to those who have nothing left to lose. So if you're watching this story unfold, don't forget to subscribe, because you are about to witness how a single dad janitor turned a moment of silence in an office into the spark of a revolution that no corporation could stop. The tension in the Zenith Corporation's gleaming office thickened as Daniel's words hung in the air like thunder waiting to crack the sky. That's my father's formula. And the silence that followed was almost suffocating. For CEO Caldwell's jaw tightened. His assistant's pens froze mid-stroke, and Daniel's own breath grew shallow. But behind that trembling exterior was the awakening of a lion who had been forced too long into the shadows. And as Caldwell tried to brush it off with a dismissive scoff, telling Daniel to get back to his mop and remember his place, Daniel refused to lower his eyes, instead taking a bold step closer to the glass board, his finger pointing directly at the sequence of symbols as he explained in a steady, resonant tone that this formula was not just numbers and letters, but the very culmination of decades of his father's research, nights filled with sweat and candlelight, calculations scribbled on scraps of paper, and experiments conducted in their small garage laboratory, all of which had been ignored by the scientific community at the time because his father lacked the wealth, connections, and corporate polish that men like Caldwell thrived upon. And Daniel's voice cracked with both grief and fire as he told them that his father died believing his work would never see the light of day. Yet here it was, resurrected without credit, stripped of name, and polished as corporate treasure. And though Caldwell barked orders for security to remove the janitor, none of the guards moved immediately, for something in Daniel's raw conviction held them in place, something that made them hesitate, as if they, too, could sense that a truth deeper than authority had been spoken. And Daniel seized that moment, declaring loudly that if Caldwell truly believed in honesty and innovation, he would allow him to bring forward the original notebook, the proof of ownership, the living evidence that this discovery belonged not to Zenith Corporation, but to the Cruz family. And when Caldwell sneered and accused him of fabricating lies, Daniel met his cold eyes with quiet defiance, stating that his daughter, his little Emma, deserved to grow up knowing her grandfather was a man of vision, not a ghost erased by greed. And at that moment, a flicker of humanity crossed the faces of the assistants and security staff, for though they worked under the CEO's iron command, They were human beings too, with fathers, with families, with dreams that had once been dismissed, and they could not help but feel the weight of Daniel's plea. And Caldwell, sensing the shift in atmosphere, ordered a meeting the next morning where Daniel would be allowed to present his so-called proof. Certain that a janitor could never shake the foundation of a billion-dollar corporation. But little did he know that this meeting would ignite a storm of revelation, courage, and justice. For Daniel returned home that night with shaking hands and weary steps, pulling out the worn notebook from its hiding place beneath his bed, running his fingers over the faded ink, and remembering his father's trembling hand guiding his own across pages when he was just a boy, whispering, "Someday, son, these numbers will matter." And now that someday had come, and as Emma looked at him with wide, innocent eyes, asking why he looked both sad and strong at once, Daniel told her that tomorrow they would fight for Grandpa's name, and Emma hugged him, telling him that no matter what happened, she was proud of him. And that single sentence gave Daniel the strength of an army. So the next day, when he walked back into Zenith Corporation, not as a janitor with a mop, but as a man carrying the legacy of his bloodline, every step echoed like a drumbeat of destiny. And in the grand boardroom where Caldwell sat surrounded by directors, investors, and scientists, Daniel placed the notebook on the polished table, flipping open page after page filled with diagrams identical to the formula on the glass, pointing out the unique annotations, the shorthand his father had used, the very fingerprints of a mind too unique to be replicated. And murmurs spread through the room as even the company's head scientist admitted that the similarities were undeniable. And for the first time, Caldwell's mask cracked, beads of sweat forming on his temple as his empire of polished lies began to tremble. But Daniel did not stop there, no. He spoke with a voice that rose like a tide, telling them all that recognition was not just about money or patents. It was about honoring those who sacrificed everything to push humanity forward. And he declared that he did not want to strip Zenith of its progress. He wanted partnership, acknowledgement, and the promise that his father's name would be remembered in every publication, every